You ready for the weekend? And really, we appreciate your time coming to see this webinar. This would be an introduction about like the course that I will be giving starting November the 6th. Yeah, I'm gonna share the screen very soon. All right, in a minute, I'm gonna start. So I'm gonna start this course November the 6th. So this webinar is to talk about, like, to give you an idea to share with you what the course will be about. It's called Weekly Torah Portions. I'm gonna share the screen. All right, as I said, we're starting the 6th of November, and now I'm gonna talk to you about this tradition of where it started, the Torah Weekly Portions. We're gonna look at it together all the way back from like all the way back in the Old Testament, as well as from the New Testament, and all the way to today, to show you the customs of the Jews today. So we're gonna learn about how this custom started in this webinar and introduce you what we're gonna be teaching the Torah portions every week starting November the 6th. So like I'll introduce this Jewish tradition of reading the Torah as they read it fully and they read it continuously every week for the whole entire year. So each week they read a special portion, Parashah. You're gonna hear this word a lot, like 3 times a week, Mondays, Tuesdays, and Saturdays. And then every week they start another portion. So the roots of this custom of reading the Torah can be traced all the way back, as I told you, to the Old Testament, to the Hebrew Bible. Also, we're gonna see from the New Testament information and practices that continued of reading the Torah and studying all the way from the Old Testament to the New Testament to the time of Jesus and even afterwards until today. So we'll discuss together all these customs and ritual, which will help like us understand better the times of the first century and what happened especially with Jesus in the first century. So this was a small introduction. Now again, we'll talk a little bit about the meaning of the word Torah. So we all know that Torah means, the original meaning means the law and teachings. Torah is like instruction, it's direction, it's guidance, comes from the root Hebrew word Yud Resh He. You can see in English YRH, Yud Resh He. And it also means, this root also means to proclaim, to instruct. And the root of the word Torah is also like a teacher, as the teacher who casts like wisdom into the hearts of his students. Yara, actually, the verb means to shoot, right to the point, right to hit the goal. In Hebrew, Yara is to shoot, yore, like to fire. The verb is the verb not in the past or in the future, but in the present. Yore is to shoot, all the way to the goal, all the way to the point. So Torah, the Torah we probably know as the first 5 books of Moses, of the Bible, the what we call the Pentateuch. And those 5 books are read constantly in its entirety in a set of consecutive portions or parts. Each week, there is a new portion, Parashah. You see this word, Parashah. It's a story or an episode It's not like what we have in our book. It's chapters divided into books and chapters. It's the same that the Jews have, but it is divided into themes, into stories. So to sum up and to answer the question of the Torah is, the Torah answers the questions of how we live. Like the more Torah, the more guidance, the more direction, is the more like we find our purpose in life. The more Torah, the more life. So this is how they would know God's way for them in the Old Testament, by reading and studying the law. This is how they know what God's want from them at that time. So they had the main 5 books. So Pentateuch, again, in Latin, penta means 5, and Theochos means scrolls. So this is the 5 books called the Torah, which we know it as Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. By the way, when a Jew is 13 years old and he becomes, he celebrates his bar mitzvah, and the first book that he starts to study, that's when he becomes a man. That's when he becomes like under God's direct responsibility. I know his parents are responsible on him, but now he's supposed to be mature. So they put him in the hands of God. And the first book that as Jews start to study is the Leviticus, which is not an easy book. And this book is so much ignored by the Christians, by the way. And so also there is, between these 5 books, there is no hierarchy. All right, no book is more important than the other. All the books are important. So back then, there was the oral Torah, the oral tradition, and these books all are attributed to Moses traditionally, because Moses was educated in the course of Egypt, so he would have the best education possible, as he was placed in Pharaoh's house to write the Torah in the wilderness when God asked him, instructed him to write the Torah. So we see here the finding of Moses, and Moses had the proper background growing in Egypt and being educated in Egypt, that he had the knowing of writing the Torah when God instructed him to do it. So understanding the Hebrew Bible, actually, the fact that we lack information about the beliefs and the biblical times compared to where we are now and we live now. So we are talking about a long period of time where different things happened, even in a different part of the world, in a different language, in a different culture. But we do not necessarily have understanding of those old times and really know what really took place. But these practices that happened there, for us to understand it fully today, like we need like to listen to that time and understand what would have been said there. So certain details were familiar to the audience at that time that we don't necessarily know about it today. So time really separates us. But nevertheless, we have a baby science, archeology, because in Bible history, we read about the past, but in the archeology, we do study, we do investigate more the past, and we understand more the customs of that time. For there are so many findings today that goes along with the Bible and does not contradict the Bible, but proves the stories of the Bible. And almost every season, many new archaeological sites have been discovered here, and many biblical sites in the land. And I'm going to give you a few examples as we go through that webinar that helps us more understand the customs of that time. We live now in a different, complete world. But with the archaeology, we've been able to investigate and find the lives of ancient times that really proves the biblical text, that goes along the biblical text. So the more time we spend, or only from the 19th and the 20th century, the more discoveries are discovered, the more it attests that the Bible is authentic. So we will have some examples of what we can learn now about this custom of reading the Torah, and we try to understand it from the little hints that we have in the text, all right, in the Bible. So I'm going to start with the Old Testament, actually, to find the origin of this custom. We'll start by reading this verse from the Old Testament, from Joshua chapter 1, verse 8. This book of the law shall not depart out of your mouth. You shall meditate on it day and night, so that you may be careful to do everything written in it. Then you will be prosperous and successful. Now, this is a very interesting verse. And we might here see the origin of practicing to read and study the Torah that goes back to the biblical times. God commanded Joshua to constantly read the book of the Torah. We do see here like a very ancient instruction. If you pay attention, this instructs to read the Torah day and night, okay, day and night, and to meditate on it, to read it and to think about it. And this was the first command. Now, this first command comes right after the end of the Torah. Remember, the Torah are the 5 books. So Joshua comes right after the Torah. So this is the first chapter after the Torah ends, after the book of Deuteronomy, in Joshua chapter 1, verse 8, that God commands Joshua to study, meditate, and read the Torah. So that's the first hint that we have in the Bible. There are few other hints. We can see here in 2 Chronicles chapter 34, verses 29 to 33, when the book of the law was found. This is what King Josiah ordered to do. Remember the reform of Josiah? I'll give you a very quick background about it. Josiah was eight years old when he was crowned as a king. But as a young boy, he decided he wanted to follow God rather than the wicked ways of his father and his grandfather, Manasseh. But without having the scrolls of God's law to teach God's way, the people at his time continued to worship the false gods. But King Josiah began his reform to search for God, because the temple of King Solomon that he built had been allowed to fall into disrepair. So King Josiah sent laborers, carpenters, and builders were set to work repairing the damaged building, and the Levites supervised this work. And while the repairs were being made, the high priest made an important discovery. There in the temple, hidden from view, was a scroll containing the book of God's law. So they found that scroll, and the king got an update of the progress of the repair work, and he immediately announced the news. So King Josiah called a meeting in the temple for everyone in Jerusalem and Judah, along with all the priests and the Levites. And the king read the words of God's laws to everyone, then promised to obey them with all his heart and soul. And the people then promised to do the same. So I'm going to only read one verse, which is verse 30. Again, from 2 Chronicles chapter 34, verse 30. He went up to the temple of the Lord with the people of Judah, the inhabitants of Jerusalem, the priests and the Levites, all the people from the least to the greatest. He read in their hearings all the words of the book of the covenant, which had been found in the temple of the Lord. So the king then ordered the priests to remove all the idols and items that had been used to worship false gods. And all the pagan altars were destroyed in the land, and figures of other like small G gods were pulled down and ground into dust. So pagan priests also who had led people into wickedness were rounded up and executed. So the Bible here describes Josiah as a good king who did what was right. All right, and we can see he read the scrolls in front of the people in public as well. So we have also this custom from the reform of Josiah. And even later, like there are more evidences in the books of the Bible, especially in the book of Nehemiah, chapter 8, where the custom of reading the Torah appears here as well. So we know that during the Persian period, the Jews started to return from the exile. And after Nehemiah rebuilds the walls of Jerusalem, thousands of people gathered to hear the Jewish leader, or the priest at that time was Ezra and Nehemiah. Ezra was the priest, Nehemiah was the leader, reading God's laws to them. And Ezra is reading the entire Torah in front of the community of the Judeans who came back from the Babylonian exile. And as Ezra read over, like for over 3 hours, there were many teachers as well in the crowd helping people to understand. I want you to notice what is written in Nehemiah chapter 8, 2-3. Just like the priest Ezra brought the laws before the assembly, both men and women, and all who could hear with understanding. This was on the first day of the 7th month. He read from it in the presence of the men and the women and those who could understand, and the ears of all the people were attentive to the book of the law. So what we can learn from these verses about this early custom to read the Torah and how it was performed, like we try to imagine living at that time. And now we want to understand what happened. And from these small hints, we will find out there are very few interesting things here that we should notice. Like, first of all, it is important to know that this is evident of a public reading of the Torah. It says before the assembly. So we see a public reading. And it's a very important piece of evidence if we want to find the origin of this custom. And then secondly, in the 3rd verse, we see that everybody was there, all the people, not just for the priest alone, but this is for everybody. This is a very important evidence of the custom of reading the Torah for everybody in public, the same as it is practiced today, by the way, in the synagogue. So when we look at the text, we can see these evidences. We see a public reading before an assembly. We see all the people, and that is a very important piece of evidence to find the origin of this custom. Now, in the days of Nehemiah, it was already a practice to read the Torah publicly in front of the whole congregation on special occasions, like rebuilding the walls of Jerusalem there. Now, I want to jump to the New Testament and give you more hints from the New Testament. So the next piece of evidence is actually from the New Testament. Probably after the destruction of the Second Temple by the Romans, the synagogues became more important, had a more important role, especially in prayer and studying, and it was central for the Jews, as well the custom of reading the Torah inside the synagogue. So around the 1st century, were many synagogues found in the land of Israel, especially in the north, in Galilee. So here, archaeology really attests to the existence of dozens of synagogues. Many synagogues were found. And the classical example that I would like to show you are the ruins of the synagogue of Magdala, which scholars believe quite very positive that Jesus did visit Magdala. The moment you walk from Nazareth, those who've been here to the land, when you walk from Nazareth, you want to go to Galilee, your first stop is Magdala, all right? Before you take a boat and continue to the northwestern shore, to Capernaum and other places. So it is important to understand that already there were synagogues, as this was a part of the custom to read the Torah every week. Now, I like to start by reading this verse from Matthew 4:23. We read, and Jesus went about all Galilee teaching in their synagogues. And definitely, you see here the courtyard of the synagogue of Magdala. You see the basalt stones, the black stones. We know this is in Galilee. Now, as well, we have this custom occurring in Nazareth. We have like the well-known scene in Luke chapter 4. Jesus had returned to his hometown, and on Sabbath, on Saturday, he went to the synagogue as his custom was. And these are verses that attest to the reading of the Torah in the synagogue. You see here it's written, as was his custom, he stood up to read. And then later the scroll of the prophet Isaiah was handed to him. So again, what can we learn from this verse about the custom of reading the Torah? So we know that the Jews went to the synagogues every Saturday, but there are here few words that tell us that this was already a practice, as was his custom. He stood up to read. And this verse is a strong evidence that this was already a custom in the synagogue to stand up and read and publicly read part of the Torah on Shabbat. Now, if we continue to read as well, that he was handed the book of the prophet of Isaiah. Now we know that Isaiah is not part of the Torah, is not part of the 5 books, right, of Moses. But in the synagogues, after reading the portion of the week from the Torah, there are also parts of the prophets that are being read as well. And I will talk more about this custom that we have it until today in the synagogues as well. So after reading the Torah, you know, there is another reader who comes and he reads from the prophets who have this same theme, that have the same theme of the portion of the Torah, right, of that week. So the important thing is that we see this custom is going to the synagogue every Saturday and to stand up and read publicly was also already practiced at the time of Jesus. So again, this custom, you know, of reading the scrolls and after reading the Torah, reading the prophets is called Haftarah in Hebrew. And we know that the scroll of the book of Isaiah was handed to him. So I'm gonna more talk about this word Haftarah, or the maftir, the person who reads from the book of the prophets, which was in this case the book of Isaiah. Okay, I'm halfway. So which cycle did Jesus follow? That's very interesting, and we will try to find out. This question, was he listening to the same Torah portions and following the same annual cycle that we know today? We're going to try to answer this question, that the Jews read like the entire Torah today. Now, there is a historian from the 1st century, a Jewish historian, Josephus. I'm sure you have to know about this historian who was born in Jerusalem, and he's like a witness for what happened in the first 100 years, like after the death of Jesus, actually. And he says, not what he writes about this custom. He writes, people have to leave off their other employments and to assemble together for the learning of the law and learning it exactly, and this not once or twice or oftener, but every week. So he's saying there is this custom of reading every week in a synagogue. And even the book of Acts later in chapter 15, which was the first Jerusalem conference, when James, the leader of Jerusalem, he gave his verdict, and this is what he says and tells us explicitly. You know, in Acts 15, chapter 21, for Moses has had throughout many generations those who preach him in every city, being read in the synagogues every Sabbath. Now, again, this custom continued from the Old Testament to the New Testament. All right, so I'm showing you more evidences from the text in the New Testament, and even later it continued with the disciples. Even the Apostle Paul. Now, if we continue in the books of Acts, we know that it was a regular custom of the Apostle Paul as well to continue to attend the synagogue every Shabbat. This is like in Acts 18, chapter 18, verse 4. It says, every Sabbath he reasoned in the synagogue, trying to persuade Jews and Greeks. And later we read as well in Acts 18, verse 19, and they came to Ephesus, and he left them there, but he himself went into the synagogue and reasoned with the Jews. So according to the testimony of the New Testament, as well as the writing of Josephus, the public reading of the Torah was practiced every Sabbath in every synagogue. So this was a very, very common custom already. Now we know, like in the first century, Judaism was pluralistic. There were different sects at that time, different directions and teachings. They were all Jews, but again, to mention some of these sects, we have the Sadducees who decided to side with the Romans. We have the Zealots who fought the Romans. We have the Essenes who ran away from the Romans. So, but all of them believed in God. All of them were Jews, but they had different directions. But to talk about the scrolls that the Essene community have left us, have wrote, the ancient Dead Sea Scrolls, which was found in the Judean desert. Again, this was the major discovery in the 20th century. All right. And this is like the earliest entire Torah manuscripts that survived until today. All right. So this is a very important like discovery, the major discovery in the 20th century that proves like our Bible or the Old Testament like was preserved until today. Now, of course, it's made of leather, of kosher animal, which has to be a sheep. And it's parchment. You like after you dry the skin of the sheep, you connect it together, you sew it together. This is why it takes time for the scroll to fold and to unfold as well. When it was given to Jesus to fold it and unfold it. So it takes several minutes to roll. And again, like this is the strongest evidence, all right? Evidence that we have the entire Bible, complete Bible until today with us here. Now, there is a difference between a scroll in ancient times and the modern books that we have today. So in ancient scrolls, the public reading had no markings other than the text. So where the reader uses a ritual hand to read, you can see here the ritual hand. And the reader almost needs to learn everything by heart. In scrolls, there were no markings. It was not easy to read the Torah publicly in the synagogue at all. But versus reading from books today, nowadays, there are extra markings, there is vocalization, there is cantillation. But in ancient times, you have really to memorize the Torah, you have to memorize the text to be able to read it without any commas or any points or anything. So it was not easy to read in ancient times. This is why they memorize it. So, but the Jews would use also a pointer, if you notice, a silver pointer, if you notice it. And in Hebrew, it's called yad, which means a hand. It's made of silver. So when reading the Torah, rather than using their finger to point, because the Torah for them is too holy to touch directly by hand. And it has a different status than any other book. It's preserved in a special box. If you notice, in every synagogue, they put it in a special box and take it out when they want to use it. So they respected, because this is the most important object for the Jews that they possess. So this is, as I told you, like Torah life. This is the guide for life that is given by Moses to God, to the Jewish people, and to all of humanity. Now, the reading of this cycle. So since the late Second Temple period, we are familiar with the custom to read the Torah in public on Shabbat. The Torah is read in its entirety, every verse and every word, in consecutive portions called Parashot or episodes. Now, 1 year cycle, actually, this cycle was established when the Jews were in Babylon in the exile, and eventually it was accepted by all. So we have this custom to read the whole Torah in 1 year that started in the exile in Babylon. Now, after they finish reading the Torah in the whole year, the whole week, Parashot every week, there's something called the joy of the Torah or Simchat Torah. So it's a celebration of completing reading the Torah, and they start now again the new cycle. Now it is celebrated every fall. Last week, like Israel celebrated after all the high holidays. This is where you can see when the final like portion is read in the service, and the reader of that portion is called Hatan Torah. Hatan means the groom of the Torah, who reads the first portion of the new cycle and start afresh. And you can see how they rejoice, they dance, they sing with the Torah, as you see in the picture, to announce like the beginning of another new cycle after all the big holidays, actually. Now, a little bit more about these portions and how they are divided. So the parasha does not necessarily correspond to the division into chapters like the Christian Bible, like Genesis, but it is according to various themes or contents. Like a parasha gets its name from the first noteworthy word in the Bible. For example, this is the first parashot or the first episode of every book. Now, forget about Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. They don't call it this way. Genesis in Hebrew is called Berashit, in the beginning. This is the first word in the Bible. So when I start my first lesson, I'm going to talk about this parasha, Berashit, and what it means and what's its relation. Bara is to create. Berashit. Rosh is like a head in the beginning. So the name of this parasha is called Berashit, from the first word of the Bible. So this is the first thing God created. And I told about the Miftar. Later, they talk about the book of Isaiah and the creation in the book of Isaiah when he talks about creation. So they relate this theme, the Haftarah, to this Torah portion. So then the next one from Shemot, names, because it talks about like the Lord spoke to Moses in the wilderness of Sinai. This is the first word in the first word in the book, and then Vayikra, to read, and he called. So that's the name of the book, Vayikra, to read. Then they don't know what is Leviticus, all right? So that is how it's divided differently. So it's up to 54 parashot every year. Sometimes it's a little bit less, sometimes it's a little bit more. They may join two parashot together, or a big one make it one. But altogether, it's up to 54 parashot in every year. So every week. So it's read in the synagogue, as I told you, several times a week, the same parasha, Mondays, Thursday, and on Shabbat. And mainly in the Shabbat morning service. And in the afternoon service, they begin the following week's parasha is read in the afternoon as well. So that's the custom that they have until today. Now, this is important. Please pay attention, because each parasha is divided into 7 sections, which means there are actually, remember the maftir, so there are 7 sections of the parasha, and then there is an 8th section. The last one is the maftir, which means there are 8 readers. So the last reader who reread the last verses of the parasha, and then he reads from the prophets, the Haftarah, which is related to the parasha. So it's called the maftir. And this is like, and this is section from the book of the prophets that is read after the parasha, shares the same idea, shares the same theme. So there are 8 people reading in a Shabbat service. 7 people read different parts of the portion, and the 8th person reads what we call the Haftarah, parts of the prophet that is related to the theme of that weekly portion. So it's very possible, or most possible, that when the parasha was already read, that then Jesus read the Haftarah, the parts of the prophet. So this custom continues until today. So this is what goes in the synagogue today. All right. So probably Jesus was given to read the book of Isaiah from that from that parasha, the maftir. It's called the maftir, who usually rereads the last few verses of the parasha and then read the haftarah. So Jesus was waiting until his turn came as the eighth person to read from the prophets, and this is when he said, "This have happened now in front of your eyes," when he read from the book of Isaiah. So as I said, this custom continues all the way until today. Mondays mornings, Thursdays morning, and Saturday morning, the Torah portion is read. And like when the person comes to recite, he says first the blessings for the Jewish community before he reads the scrolls. So he blessed it in front of the people. And this is what they pray before they read the Torah or the portion. They say, "Bless God for whom our blessing is due. Blessed be God to whom our blessing is due forever and ever. Blessed are you, our Lord, our God, King of the universe, he who has chosen us for all the peoples and has given us his Torah. Blessed are you, O Lord, giver of the Torah." And even after they finish reading the Torah, they recite also a similar blessing as well, cultivating the blessings of God for the gift of the Torah. So really, to conclude, the Torah represents everything that the Jews stand for. It is the greatest gift they believe that God has given to them and to the whole world. So which is why blessings are said before and after with deep reverence in front of all the congregation. Now again, the Torah is part of the identity of the Jewish people. Most Jews know the Torah portions. It is as voice for us as Christians. And for them, the most one they are proud of is the portion that they have it when they had their bar mitzvah, when they became 13 years old. It is like voice for us in the Christian world. It's part of what we are. So if you want to relate to a Jew and you talk to him about this, like about Torah portions, this is a good way to connect to him. A good way is to go to his bar mitzvah. A good way is to go a wedding, not to go to a synagogue. All right. It will be very weird for a Christian to go to a synagogue. It's not like us. We like to invite people to church, which is normal. But for the Jews, like, it'll be a big question mark. So if you want to relate, if you have a Jewish friend or a neighbor, a good way to relate, if you want to start talking about the Torah portions, for example, of his bar mitzvah, and talk about the name of the Torah of that portion. So this way you can relate. So it's really very important to the life of the Jew to find the Torah portion also connected to his day of birth. God gave us the gift of life. So it is up to us to give ourselves the gift of living well. All right. Now, I would put a link on the chat to find your birthday Torah portion. I'll ask from my colleague Setrak to put this link, and it's a very easy link. You just click on it and you put your date of birth, and it will give you the Torah portion of the week of your birth. So you would know what was that week of birth for your Torah portion. And if you like to study it and read it more, it will be interesting. So again, this was just an introduction of the custom of reading the Torah. We traced it all the way back from the Old Testament into the New Testament, and we talked about this custom today. And starting November 6th, I will begin with the first portion of the Torah, which is Parashot, Parashot, at the beginning. We're gonna talk about it. Now, this is a course that I'm gonna be teaching. Now, this was just an introduction, a webinar about the course. And as I said, I'll be starting from November 6th for almost 6 weeks. I'm gonna give like 6 Torah portions, Parashot, Noah, and continue these portions and learn this custom from a Jewish point of view, which will deepen our faith, and we're gonna be an eye opener for things that we don't look them as Christian. When we discover the Jewish point of view, it will widen our horizons as well and strengthen our faith. Now, the cost of this of these 6 lessons is $120, but we have an offer. Twin Stores team have an offer. If you register this weekend, like Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, from 9 till 11 of October, the cost will be only $50. The cost for the 6 weeks, every week, starting from November the 6th. And if you want to know how to register, you can enter this website that will be on the chat as well, walkingtheholyland.com/book/online, and you're welcome to join us if you are interested from November 6th. I encourage you to do it because you're going to have these teachings, an eye-opener from a Jewish point of view, from a different point of view, and you're going to find the Bible is totally different. If we look at like totally enriching when we look at it from a Jewish point of view. Again, thank you everybody for joining us. And were you able to find your verse? I'll put it again on the chat. I'll put the website where you can find your verse, Bible Torah of your verse. See in a moment. So if you just click on this link on the chat, it will take you directly, and you just fill your birth date and month and year, and it will give you your Torah portion. And if you register to the course, probably I'm going to talk about probably part of that portion. So thank you, everybody. Thank you for your time for joining. And you're welcome. If you have any questions, I'm open. And I hope this just give you a taste of what the lesson is going to be about. I just gave you a very quick basic introduction, and yeah. So were you able to find your to go to the website to find it?
I'm working on it.
Okay, good.
Yes,
Good.
mine is Deuteronomy 21:10-25. The Torah portion, and the Haftarah portion, Isaiah 54. I like that.
Yeah, and thank you, Sherry. Sherry suggested it will be good for everyone to share on social media for those who are not here today. So please spread the word. Spread the word, and blessings are from God. You know, it's a mutual blessing. Tony, why does the church stop reading Torah as part